My name is Michael Brito. I am a recovering direct marketer. You're supposed to laugh. So I know content marketing very well. In fact, early on in my career, I worked at HP, and I managed search. I had about a $12, $15 million budget, and I managed search, both natural and paid, and it was fun. And I realized as I kind of matured and grew older that customers don't like to be referred to as clicks, views, target audience, segments, and that they're real people. So I've kind of transitioned my career to do more social. I've been doing that for the last 7-8 years, currently working for Edelman Digital. So today we're going to talk about transforming your brand to a media company. Now, when I talk to my clients about this, they say there's a few things, pushback that they give me. One is, we're not a media company. Number two is, they say, we want to be a media company, but we don't know how to be one. And then the third one is, show us how to do it. So we're doing this today, building out content strategy and content planning for some very large brands here in the Bay Area and globally. So what Toby said earlier, he said that brands act and think like publishers, and I just want to take it one level further. Brands, your brand, whether it's large or small, needs to start thinking and acting and operating like a media company. Why? Media companies today are relevant, they're recent, they're agile, and they're omnipresent. When you hear something in the news, the first thing you do is Google it, and what shows up? An article from CNN or Huffington Post. You've probably seen similar content on your Facebook feed, maybe some tweets. Brands that think like media companies are omnipresent. They are everywhere. And you need to be everywhere because customers, in order for them to believe what you're saying as marketers, they need to hear, see, or interact with your content 3 to 5 times. It's from the Edelman Trust Barometer. I'm not going to talk about who the social customer is because I think we are all social customers. We know that. So let's just move on from that. But I want to talk about 4 kind of key areas that are making us transition and making us change the way that we organize teams and develop content and interact with customers. The first one is that we live in a multi-screen economy. That picture in the upper right-hand corner looks very familiar to me. I have an 11-year-old daughter. She had a birthday party with 10 of her girlfriends at my house, and I was upstairs because I had to get away from all these girls in my house, and it was really quiet, and I thought that they were watching TV or a movie. So I went downstairs. They were all on their iPod Touches, texting back and forth. They were all in the same room, and I couldn't even agree. I couldn't deal with that. Anyhow, we live in a multi-screen economy. So as a marketer, the challenge for you is not only optimizing content for different screen resolutions, now you're dealing with iPads and iPods and iPod Touches and all these Android devices and Microsoft devices. So now you have that challenge, and you couple that with the fact that our journey as customers are dynamic, right? Every morning I wake up, I roll over, I check my feed, check for any retweets or tweets or status updates or texts or messages or emails. And my daily routine is different. The way that I navigate my day is never the same. So as a marketer, for you trying to reach somebody like me, it makes it very difficult for you to do that. Because going back to the 3 to 5 times, now all of a sudden you got to hit me with some traditional media, you got to hit me with some paid media. And the truth is, as a customer, I'm putting up filters. Because I only want to consume the content that is relevant to me at a given time. I live in the South Bay. I live in Santa Clara. When I was in the process of refinancing my home about 6 years ago, I would drive down the freeway and I would see Quicken Loans billboard advertising everywhere. On the radio, I heard advertisements. I would see status updates. Hey, I'm refinancing my home, 3.9% APR. The minute that I refinanced my home, all of those ads went away. But you know they didn't really go away. They're still there, but they're just not relevant to me at that time. The third point is communication is real time and social media is real. Everybody remember the Arab Spring in Egypt, 2010. In the morning, January 24th, the square was empty. By 4 or 5 o'clock, there were millions of people in that square. The University of Washington did a study, and they studied the tweets, the gigabytes of video, comments, YouTube, Twitter, everything leading up to this day, and there was about 2,300 interactions as it related to this region on the 2 or 3 days prior to this event. On the day of that event, that went from 2,300 to over 300,000 conversations per minute as it related to this event, or per hour, okay? So social media content, it moves people. It changes government. The last piece is, despite your clout score, despite how many friends, fans, and followers you have, everyone is influential. How many times have you decided not to fly a certain airline because somebody posted a negative experience on Twitter or Facebook? How many times have you decided to fly on an airline because of the same thing? We are all influential. Now, despite all that stuff, we as marketers, we still have core business objectives. Increasing revenue, margin, market share. Those are all still important. So what happened was, many years ago, with the rise of of social media, you have all these different networks. You had all these, Monday morning quarterbacks saying, you know what, this brand, they suck. They should engage in the conversation. You've heard that before, right? Brands need to engage in two-way dialogue. We've been saying that for the last 7 years. Or if I was working for this brand, I would have done this and this and this and this, hoping to get hired by them. And what happened was brands started to listen. They started to get smart. They started investing in platforms. But the problem is that due to the fact that nobody communicates in large organizations, you've had siloed communities, siloed content. This is a study by the Altimeter Group in 2011, or is it 11 or 12? I don't know, it was about a year ago. On average, large brands have 178 social media channels. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that from a content perspective, from a management perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a community engagement and crisis perspective? It's unmanageable. So I want to talk about this, and that has resulted in several different challenges that you might be going through today. One is employees' inappropriate use of social media. I've gotten in trouble so many times I used to work at Intel as well. The legal team would always be sending me emails. Internal confusion of roles and responsibility. Who owns the customer experience? Who owns the Facebook page, marketing or PR? Because they're not communicating. You know that they both want it. So they're both probably creating their own disjointed communities. I'm not going to talk about inconsistent measurement because that's still around, but disjointed content and community practices. Number one challenge for brands today. One of my clients, basically, we did an audit. They had 180 administrators to their Facebook page. When we looked at their content, they were posting at odd hours of the night. There was spelling errors. There were grammar errors. There were, they weren't following the kind of best practices and using URL shorteners and images, and they weren't asking questions. It was a free-for-all. There was no management, no communication. So one of the things that I do at Edelman is I kind of lead a team that does social business strategy, and it really focuses on building the internal infrastructure of your organization so that you as a marketer can better create content, so that you can better scale community management, so that you can better scale metrics and analytics. Okay, so it's very much focused on internal change management. I want to highlight the last sentence here, how social business strategy must drive shared value for all stakeholders, customers, partners, and employees too. And this is how it plays out. Number 1 and 2, right? Let's start with number 1. Customers drive value back to your brand by what? Buying your product. They indirectly sell your product through advocacy. They're also giving you feedback. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it's dumb. The way that you complete that value exchange is by number 2. It's engagement, right? It's community management. I would say content marketing can fall in that category, but there's still, every time I read an article about content marketing, it's about SEO, and it's so much more than just SEO. That's one small element of content strategy. But you complete the cycle simply by engaging in that relationship. Now, the way that it works internally, number 3, if you have a central team, they are driving collaboration amongst marketing and PR, also enabling teams. That's what social business does. It enables teams to what? Improve process, Improve products. Anybody here use Amazon Prime? That was an employee idea. And now it accounts for, last I heard, 20% of Amazon's revenue. Employee idea. Process improvement. And the big one is employee advocacy. People don't trust you and I. We're marketers, we're communicators. But what they do trust is they trust engineers, they trust product managers, they trust those really authentic voices to what? Engage with the community. So it's almost like a figure 8 of shared value across the entire ecosystem. And I'll make these slides available in case you want to use them and steal my graphics. Here's the difference between a social brand, which I think you all are familiar with, and social business. On the left, social brand, it's the way that we communicate externally. It's marketing, campaigns, events, even customer support. Social business is, again, it's the infrastructure, it's the training, the process, the governance. We put a plan together for a client here in the Bay Area, and we called it a content governance plan. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to kind of highlight what that was all about in a second. And how much time do I have? Oh, I'm flying. Whew, okay. So anyway, we're talking about the transformation from brand to media company. And whether you like it or not, and my CEO, Richard Edelman, has said this, every brand is a media company. Anybody here know who Elon Musk is? Okay. He is the CEO of a company called Tesla Motors. They're right across the bay. And they produce a really kick-ass Model S. It looks like a Jaguar, BMW, electrical vehicle. And the New York Times wrote a very negative article about, not negative article, it was a review about the Model S. And the CEO, Mr. Musk, kind of created a rebuttal. He wrote a blog post on teslamotors.com/blog, and he just talked about how it was unfair that this reporter wrote this article. And what the reporter didn't know was that with these electrical vehicles, that Tesla has all of the data of where the car is driving, when's the last time they recharged, everything. And he basically tore apart the New York Times. 5 or 10 years ago, that would have never happened. The Wall Street Journal, Huffington Post, well, they weren't around back then, but New York Times, the Chronicle, if they wrote a negative review about your product, you just had to suck it up. Today, now brands have an opportunity to leverage that thinking that media companies do and have a dialogue and be a part of the conversation like Musk did just a couple days ago. What did New York Times do? They apologized. And they wrote, apparently what I heard is they're writing a revised article on one of their blogs. Okay? So every company is a media company because media companies need to be relevant, they need to be recent, they need to be agile, and they need to be omnipresent. But how do you get started? The first thing that you need to do is create a centralized team. In many cases, it could be considered a social business center of excellence, or and many, many years ago when I worked at Intel, they had first formed the center of excellence, and there were just 1 or 2 people, and it was kind of their part-time job, right? Today, and I know that we have somebody from Intel speaking. Hopefully, she'll talk more about it later. But now it's like it's an organization. It's a fully functional organization with budget. It's not like a committee anymore. But when you talk about a center of excellence, there's key people that need to be a part of this process. It's your analytics team. It's your marketing team. It's your customer support team. It's your PR team. IT needs to be involved. I don't know how many times I've launched marketing programs only to get it turned off midway because it violated an IT issue. So having them involved very early on is important. You might want to include regional leads. If you're a global organization like Oracle, like Intel, having an APAC lead and an EMEA lead and a Latin America lead who get together once a week or once every 2 weeks and talk about what's working from a content perspective, among other things, what's not working, developing training so that employees can be enabled to engage with customers, train even partners in the supply chain. If you're working, Intel partners with HP and every other PC manufacturer and Qualcomm and all these other large companies. Imagine being able to create content together through the supply chain to change customer behavior. So this center of excellence or this centralized editorial team, whatever you want to call it, is going to look different for every company. But having a team that's talking about best practices and sharing that across the organization is very important. And here's how it would kind of play out, right? So your center of excellence is along the bottom there, and you have your product marketing, you have your marketing operations, your customer support, PR and communications. It could be even employees. And as you plan for campaigns and product launches and events, and just your day-to-day two-way engagement on Facebook, Twitter, and blogs, etc., your center of excellence is going to be driving the training, the policies, the social media policies is important, the technology adoption, right? So the center of excellence, going back to having somebody in IT involved, before you invest in a Kapost, before you invest in a Radian 6, before you invest in some other company, make sure that IT is part of that process. Your content plan, your content strategy, I should say. What are the things that your brand is comfortable talking about and what are they not? And then you kind of pull that into campaigns, initiatives, community engagement, paid, earned, and owned media, also known as converged media. And the last piece is customer support. And then you take all those analytics and reporting and you kind of bridge it back into all of your stakeholders and share what's working and sharing what's not. In 2003, I went to the brand manager for HP and I said, we need a blog. And she's like, oh my God, no. And I said, why? She said, because they'd say negative things about us. So I went to YouTube, I did a video search, and there was, the first video that came up was this person who was really upset at support, and he threw like a printer over the second story building of an apartment complex. And I said, well, hello, let's and they're phenomenal today in social. But the problem with, or here's the challenge when you think about the brand narrative, right? Because still today, brand marketers, traditional brand managers, they have one way of thinking. It's our brand message, our brand positioning, our value proposition. That's the way that we need to communicate that to our customers. But we as customers we reject that. We reject those messages. So when you're creating your strategy, that is an input. Understanding how your product works and what problem it solves, those are all part of your content strategy as an input. But then you also want to take into consideration third-party research. What does the media say when they reference your brand? How does the community talk about you within your owned media? So on your Facebook page, or on blogs, or on the comments on a YouTube video. What do they say when they reference your brand? And then looking at your content. What's working in social today and what's not? What's the type of content that generates the most engagement, the most clicks, the most likes, shares, comments, retweets, loves? There's just so many actions, right? Looking at that content, and that is an input of your content strategy. And then understanding search behavior. We are all probably search marketers. We all know that there's free tools that Google tells you, Google Trends, of different search volume in terms that are getting popular. There's also a tool that'll tell you the frequency of searches based on your query. That is part of your input. You couple that and you get your teams in a room together and you talk about what are those tiers of content that we are going to share? What's the frequency of marketing messages that we are going to share versus curated content? What is the frequency of just fun content, like, well, I'll talk about Oreo in a minute, like that, more so than content that's more focused on our brand positioning. We did a content strategy for a client. It was a Word document, 185 pages. Talked about tiered content, frequency of content, measurement of that content, best practices of that content. That is a content strategy. That is driving the content that they're using on Facebook, on Twitter, for blogs, and it's starting to influence their corporate website. That's hero content. That's what I call hero content. The second piece is a real-time listening center. This is Hootsuite's. Hootsuite is a client of Edelman. This is Hootsuite's dashboard for the election last year, and it just monitors. It was monitoring brand mentions, right? A lot of companies are investing in and building products that are called command centers. So think of like the Bourne Identity when they're like hunting for Jason Bourne, and they're all watching him on these GPS monitors. That's a command center. Dell has one. Gatorade has one. The Oregon Ducks have one. Several companies have one. This is important in your content strategy. This is going to help you identify trends. It's going to help you identify support issues. It's going to help you identify potential crisis issues. And it's also good for the CMO. The CMO is going to say, oh, look at my brand compared to their brand. They suck. We're killing them. So not very actionable in those cases. But other companies are, when we think about content and trending content, right? Let's talk about Oreo for a second, okay? Everybody know the story? The Oreo story? I'm getting a few, but okay, I'll just recap in 30 seconds. Basically, when my Niners were down 17-0 and I was extremely upset and I didn't even watch it and see it, there was a blackout. And Oreo moved really quick. They created a tweet that said, power out, no problem. They linked to an image that had this Oreo with this black and white gradient image that said, you can still dunk in the dark. Pretty creative, right? Oreo's been known for doing that for a while. Oreo, Taco Bell, Old Spice have all been kind of capitalizing on real-time trending events and inserting themselves into the conversation. A lot of talk, like Adweek wrote something about this just the other day. Ad Age wrote a piece on they're calling it real-time content marketing or real-time content engagement or creation. We have a product at Edelman called the Creative Newsroom. We're doing this today with several clients. But this idea of while it's fun and it's amazing and they're getting a lot of coverage for it, should only be 10% of your content strategy. Now, it's very easy for me to say, monitor what's happening in society or politics or pop culture and be able to create content within an hour to become recent and relevant. Very hard to do, right? Because you have to have content writers. You have to make sure legal is signed off on that scenario. You need to make sure that you have a producer, somebody who can put a Photoshop image together like super quick, and somebody who can write really good content and knows the community. It's exactly what the newsroom does every day. It's exactly what David Letterman does every day. They get together in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, and they say, what happened last night? What's happening right now? What can we write about right now? Brands need to start thinking like that. I have two more pieces. This is assigning roles and responsibilities. Contributors, editors, regional editors. And this can play out in any scenario based on your business, right? Contributors could be product groups. It could be a contributor from the marketing department. There could be a contributor from customer support. Hopefully your support groups are creating content based on what people are dialing in for to the call center or asking questions in their knowledge base. You create content, capitalize on search, decrease calls to the call center. Contributors could be employees. That's what I love about Kapos, and I'm being honest, and I'm not just saying that because you invited me here, Toby. But we use Kapos for Edelman Digital. We have hundreds of writers who they can they can't publish to our blog, they can't publish to our Twitter account, but they can contribute content, and then our editors, our community manager, Chris, in Chicago, then reviews it and sends it back for editing or assigns it and puts it on the calendar for publishing. And that could play out in a variety of different scenarios, right, depending upon your team. And then here's how that works from a flow perspective. Team brainstorms ideas, a contributor writes a piece of content, it goes through this series of workflows, and this is the stuff I geek out about. It's not sexy, but I love this stuff. So this is kind of how it would work for one client, right, using a platform, and it just goes through these series of things that or controls. Legal's probably involved here. A community manager's probably involved here. And this is how you kind of turn on that content engine. Think about Forbes. Forbes is an interesting site. They allow for contributors. And these contributors don't get paid. They write on Forbes to basically say, oh, I'm a Forbes writer, right? So it feeds their ego. But Forbes is creating a crap load of content. Every single day I see articles from Forbes. And they don't even hire the writers. They're using contributors who are just doing it for either the link or for thought leadership. The last piece is, this is very complicated, but very important. When you think about the way that you engage in a dialogue, having controls that escalate conversations to support or crisis, or even if you want to create kind of an official advocacy program, you're identifying those highly influential people in your communities, you're putting them on a list, and you're figuring out how to amplify them and enable them at a later time, okay? So support decision work trees need to be a part of your content strategy. And this is blank because there are so many technology vendors out there. And there's acquisitions happening. Oracle's making a ton of moves in this space. A lot of companies that are coming out with new products. So don't start off with the technology. If you know you want to make this transformation into a media company, don't go find a vendor and say, help us. You need to change your internal behavior, get the right people involved in the conversation, start assigning roles and responsibilities, building your centralized team. Then, and only then, do you go to a vendor and say, here's our plan. Can you build requirements around our needs? Don't change your needs based on what their capabilities are. And here's my contact information. There's my email address. I'm also on Twitter. It's Britopian, not Britopian. Some of my friends call me Britopian. I don't know why. It's Britopian on Twitter. And I'm not a very self-promotional kind of guy, but I am writing a book on this topic that'll be released in September. Your Brand, the next media company. So keep an eye out for that. But I want to thank you all for your attention today, and I'll be hanging out for the next couple of hours if you want to talk. And are we opening it up for questions? Okay, cool.
First off, it's a round of applause for Michael. Thanks so much. So I see that the Royal Majesty has a question. We'll pass it over to her.
Should I bow?
The scepter. Yes, please.
Oh, thank you, Toby. You love to feed my ego. Thank you. I'm Jill Rowley. I'm with Eloqua Oracle. And great presentation. Thank you. The one thing I would say about, I totally agree, it's not technology first. It's who are the people on your team, what are their skill sets, what are the processes that you have in place, what processes do you need, what content do you have, your content audit, understanding the buyer's journey and aligning to the buyer persona. But the reason why you actually do go to the technology vendor, not to have a conversation with a salesperson, but you go to their sites for their content. So I would say, like Kapost, although you might not be ready for their technology, there's an incredible amount of educational content on what is content marketing. And they're not just talking about, the good news is that the great vendors, the great technology vendors, aren't talking about their products until later stage content. They're actually helping you learn how to solve the content marketing problem. So I would say, although don't talk to the technology salesperson, because then you're going to get in their opportunity pipeline and their management's going to hassle them because it hasn't progressed because you're not ready to buy. But I would go to these vendors' websites for their incredibly educational content to help you solve the business problem that you have.
I agree, and Joe Chernoff's a good friend of mine who was at Eloqua for quite some time. And you guys, and Eloqua puts out really good content, as does Kapost. So yeah, I mean, certainly do your research as well, and there's a ton of good sites out there. There's the Content Marketing Institute also that does a lot of education for you as you kind of prepare this journey. What else?
Excellent. Okay, I have a question from Twitter while I'm over there that I wanted to say. So someone
officially from Twitter or somebody on Twitter?
Someone on Twitter.
Okay.
The Twitter people got to. I know you're out here somewhere.
Where's the Twitter people?
You got to speak up, at least on Twitter. But someone asked, you referenced 179 social accounts in one corporation. Their question was, how does one manage that? I would think consolidation would be in order, but I leave it to you. That's the question for you. How do you manage 179 social accounts?
Yeah, I mean, certainly consolidation. It's even hard to manage one Twitter account. Look what happened to Burger King and Jeep, right? So there's a security component as well. So now if you have 150 channels, now your workload just went up 1,000%. So certainly when we talk to clients and we help them consolidate, it's usually going from 100 Twitter accounts, which could be based on product or region, down to 1 or 2 or 3. Making sure that there's a community manager responsible for that who can respond, and then also have a very specific content strategy for each of those accounts, because you don't just want to repeat and retweet each other. It just doesn't make sense.
Fantastic. So we got another question right here.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Monica. I'm from Atmel. You say we need to transform from a brand into a media company. Define media company. What does that mean?
It's a good question. And I would say a media company creates content that changes behavior. And if you work for a company that's selling a product, you want to change behavior. You want them to look at your company different. You want them to buy your products. You want them to tell others about your product. So one could argue that Twitter's a media company. And I think they are. Google's a media company. Obviously, the CNN and Gannett are media companies. Now, when I say media company, I don't necessarily say, it's not like you go into a newsroom like at CNN or NBC. Now, that's a real media company. I'm talking about the way that we think about content, the way that we amplify and employ our stakeholders to create content on our behalf, because we can all attest that content is the #1 challenge, right? There's only so much content that you can create, and it gets expensive when you're doing videos and infographics, etc. So now what do? Do you crowdsource content from your community? What's your curation strategy? So our teams struggle with content. Media companies don't have a problem with content. There's just, I mean, they have hundreds of people who are like ready at beck and call to create content based on what's happening in the news or what's happening in the media. So as a brand, if we can start thinking differently, it'll help us from a content ideation perspective to content creation, to content distribution, to content approval, and then optimizing that content once it's live.
Any other questions from anyone here? Super.
Hi, I'm Don Naneman. I'm unemployed, but interested in looking at new opportunities. I wanted to ask a question, maybe challenge a point that you made a few moments ago in your presentation, and that was that we need to get IT involved. Now, we had a similar discussion at a marketing operations event last week about whether marketing operations should be managed by IT versus by marketing. When did we get the impression that IT had domain expertise in social media? Comment?
So there's a huge conversation going on right now. Is it the CMO of IT or the CTO of marketing? Right. So that's a conversation that's still TBD. That's based on my personal experience. Because what you're having junior marketers making technology decisions without having that expertise on security. The fact that Twitter accounts have been hacked is a huge IT issue. So ensuring that they're at least part of the conversation. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to go through IT. Because in my career, they've always been a roadblock. Even today. I just got a Mac finally. But they've always been a roadblock, but now they're realizing that IT needs to open it up. That's why you can bring any device into your company and they'll work with you to make sure that you can get email. But they need to be a part of the conversation early on, not after, not seeking approval in essence, but at least as you source and identify the right technology vendors, they should be a part of the conversation is what I was trying to say.
Cool. Well, thank you, Michael. I know there's some more questions, but I think we need to move on. Please tweet the questions. We'll collect them. Free content marketing tip, gather questions, great things for you to create content about. So please let us know further questions and we can forward them to Michael or somehow we'll let them know. So thank you, process and the organizational change, huge part of content marketing success. Thanks again to Michael. Let's get a round of applause for him.